Mandla Nkub had spent most of his life fighting against the crushing weight of poverty. Born in a small village near the Zimbabwean-Mozambican border, he had grown up with dreams of escaping hunger and struggle. Yet no matter how hard he worked, plowing the dry, unforgiving land, laboring in mines, or selling scraps in the market, poverty clung to him like a stubborn shadow. Mandla was a bitter man, especially as he watched other men rise from nothing to wealth, seemingly overnight. They built mansions in villages where people still lived in mud huts. They drove imported German cars while their neighbors walked barefoot. He knew something wasn't right. One night while drinking cheap cachasu, local moonshine, at a shebeen, he overheard a drunkard named Baba Jethro ranting about men who use goblins, tokalashis, to become rich. "They sleep with demon," Baba Jethro hissed. "They let the creatures defile their women, their daughters, but in return they never go hungry. Money flows like a river for them." Mandla's pulse quickened. "Where can a man get such power?" he asked cautiously. Baba Jethro laughed darkly, then leaned in. "There is a woman in the forests of Mozambique, a sangoma feared even by spirits. Gogo Noxolo. If you have the stomach for true power, she will show you the way." Mandla barely slept that night. By dawn, he had made his decision. He would go. Deep in the forests of Mozambique, Mandla found Gogo Noxolo's shrine, a place of bone, smoke, and whispers. Skulls lined the entrance, and strange feathered dolls hung from trees. The Sangoma was an ancient woman, her skin wrinkled like cracked earth, her eyes black pools of knowing. She studied Mandla in silence before speaking. "You are desperate." "Yes, Gogo." "You are greedy." "Yes," she chuckled. "Then you are ready." That night, under the full moon, Gogo Noxolo performed the ritual. A black rooster's throat was slit, its blood forming symbols on the ground. The air grew thick, heavy with something unnatural. Then they came. The Tokaloshis emerged from the darkness, small, twisted creatures with glowing red eyes and sharp teeth. They grinned at Mandla with unnatural hunger. "You have called us," one hissed. "What do you seek?" "Wealth," Mandla whispered. The goblins exchanged looks and grinned. "Then you must belong to us. You must feed us." Mandla's heart pounded. He had expected sacrifice. A cow, a goat, maybe even a human. But he didn't know what feeding truly meant. The goblins surrounded him, their red eyes glowing brighter. He felt something cold and invisible slither over him, inside him. A burning sensation filled his chest. Then he blacked out. The next morning, Mandla woke up in his small hut. It had felt like a dream, until he stepped outside. A brand new car sat outside his home. His cattle, only 5 the night before, had multiplied into a herd. When he checked his mobile banking account, the numbers had changed. Millions. He had won. But the whispers started immediately. At first it was his wife, Thandiwe. She complained of terrible nightmares, of something heavy climbing onto her at night. She felt violated but saw nothing. Then his teenage daughter, Namusa, woke up screaming. She too felt invisible hands touching her, pressing her down, forcing themselves inside her. Mandla knew what was happening. He had read about it, heard whispers in the village. The Tokaloshas were feeding, but he ignored it. Every day money poured in. He invested in businesses, bought property in Johannesburg, Harare, and Kinshasa. People admired him, envied him. Women threw themselves at him. But the price, it kept rising. One day, a local businessman, Mr. Delamini, refused to pay Mandla back a loan. Days later, he died in a horrific car accident, his body torn in ways no normal crash should cause. Another time, a young woman, Zanale, rejected Mandla's advances. Within a week, she was found dead in a river, her face twisted in terror. Mandla knew it was the goblins. He never ordered them to do these things. But they did them anyway. They protected his interests, ensured his will was done, and they wanted more. One night, Tendiwe screamed louder than ever before. Mandla rushed into their bedroom and found her curled in a corner, shaking violently. Her nightdress was torn, and her skin was covered in bruises, fingerprints from invisible hands. They raped me," she whispered, her voice hollow. "They are punishing me for speaking against you." Mandla's heart pounded. He knew it was true. The goblins were punishing her because she had begun questioning the source of his wealth. But that wasn't the worst part. That same night, his daughter Namusa fell into a trance. Her eyes rolled back, and she began speaking in a voice that was not her own. "We own you, Mandla," the voice rasped. "We will take from you." "Ish, ish. We own you, Mandla," the voice rasped. "We will take from you everything." Then, with inhuman strength, she threw herself into the fire pit. Mandla grabbed her just in time, but her arm was badly burned. That night, for the first time, Mandla felt fear. The more Mandla tried to escape his fate, the worse things became. The goblins no longer waited for nightfall. They moved in shadows during the day, whispering in his ears, laughing at him. He could feel their sharp fingers trailing over his skin. And then he started waking up sore. He knew what it meant. They were using him now. In desperation, Mandla sought out a powerful prophet in Harari. The man listened to his story and shook his head. "You made a deal with demons," he said. "Only death can free you now." Mandla refused to accept it. Instead, he returned to Gogonoxolo. He begged her to undo the ritual. She only laughed. "You think you can take their gifts and walk away?" she spat. "You are theirs until they have finished with you." "But how do I stop them?" he pleaded. She leaned in, her breath smelling of decay. "You must sacrifice someone you love. Give them the blood of your firstborn, and they may leave you. For a while." Mandla froze. His firstborn, Nomusa. Could he do it? Could he kill his own daughter to save himself? He went home, knife in hand. But when he stepped into the house, he found Nomusa's lifeless body hanging from the rafters. The goblins had taken her first. After Nomusa's funeral, things spiraled. Thandiwe left, refusing to stay another night in that cursed house. Mandla, now alone, became a madman. He spoke to shadows, screamed at unseen creatures. His businesses collapsed. His money vanished. One night, his neighbors heard terrifying screams coming from his mansion. When they broke down the door, they found him twisted in an unnatural position, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. He was dead, but even in death, his body bore marks, claw marks from something not human. Mandla's story became legend, a warning to greedy men who sought wealth without understanding the price. And deep in the shadows, the goblins laughed, waiting for their next victim. Because there is always another fool, willing to trade his soul for riches. But the price never changes. Torment, suffering, and an inescapable doom.